All right, everyone, welcome to Great Debates, Great Decisions, Great Deciders. Moving on to a new series, The Great D's of the Kotel. Unfortunately, we are once again in this period of time, the Ben HaMetzarim, the period between the tragedies, the days between Shva Asar B'Tammuz leading up to Tisha B'Av, and in Mirz Hashem Tisha B'Av this year will hopefully be a Yontiv, where we will be looking at this wall in person, and we will be dancing with all of Klal Yisrael as Mashiach has arrived and the third Beis Hamikdash has been gifted to us. But in the meantime, it is important and incumbent upon every single Jew to take the time necessary to be able to appropriately mourn the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. It is a serious mourning that happens. You know, the Shulchan Aruch writes, and it's quite shocking when you read the words of the Shulchan Aruch. But the Shulchan Aruch says that that there's a obligation upon every Jew when they see the site of the destruction of the temple to render their clothes. And the rendering of the garments that takes place when seeing the Kotel, says the Shulchan Aruch, is the same type of kriya, it's the same type of tear that one would make upon the death of one of their parents. The same type of tear. Meaning, just like for your parents, you tear on your left side over your heart, not on your right side, and the amount that needs to be torn is more of an amount. That type of tear is the type of tear that needs to be made upon witnessing the site of the destruction of the temple. The Makom HaMikdash is the Beisi Beis Tefillah Yikareh L'Kol Ha'amim, as the Navi says. It's a place where it's a house of worship for all of the nations of the world, to all come together and praise God in this place. The Kotel itself, though, has a lot of significance. The Kotel itself has, as we'll go through the sources this evening and throughout this series, it is a very, very significant place for the Jewish people. Emotionally, we know this to be true. I want to share an amazing video that was put together by someone who I consider to be a Rabbi. His name is Rabbi Judah Michel. He is the director. I think he's the executive director of Camp Hask. In Camp Hask, he really has made the place into really just a special environment where children with special needs are able to come and spend the summer and give them a very, very unique experience. So he recently put together a video telling a story about Rav Soloveitchik related to the Kotel. Listen to this. It's unbelievable. Listen to this.
Shalom Aleichem, everyone. In 1968, in the Yom HaAtzmaut address, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik Zatzal shared the following episode from his youth. There was a shliach, a shadar, who came from Eretz Yisrael to visit the shtetls, was going around collecting money, and he came to visit the cheder where the Rav was learning.
This is when Rav Soloveitchik was a young student in yeshiva, and this is what he's witnessing there.
His malamed at the time, his name was Reb Baruch Yaakov, greeted the shliach warmly and asked the kids to step out of the room. So of course all the kids went to the window to hear what the conversation was. The malamed said to this visitor,
"Can't see anything. Are we supposed to see something right now?"
You don't see anything? No one sees anything?
We see if there's a gray box sort of on top of it. I mean, it covers part of it.
What about now?
There,
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
said to this visitor, "Tell me the truth. Are you really from Eretz Yisrael?" He said, "Yeah, I'm really from Eretz Kodesh." He said, "You telling me the truth?" He said, "Yeah, I'm from Eretz Yisrael, yeah." He said, "Tell me, have you been to Jerusalem? Have you been to Yerushalayim?" I said, "Yeah, of course." He said, "You've been to the Western Wall? You've been to the Kotel Maravi?" He said, "Of course." "And your hands have touched the Kotel Maravi?" I said, "Of course, yes." And this Melamed, Rabbi Baruch Yaakov, grabbed the hands of this Shaliach and kissed them. And with tears in his eyes, continued to kiss his hands over and over. Rav said, "This is what I remember. It's not just a story, but it's an episode that he witnessed as a young man. These are stories that have happened throughout the generations." Says the Rav, "When Ezra consecrated the Jewish land, he also consecrated the Jewish heart. And the Jewish attachment, the natural attachment to Eretz Yisrael, became consecrated and converted into an eternal attachment between a Yid and Eretz HaKodesh. And perhaps a greater miracle than the actual consecration and holiness of the land is the consecration of the yearning in every Jewish heart to be in Eretz Yisrael and be connected to Eretz Yisrael. During these days, from close and from far, our hearts are yearning for a connection to the land of Israel. Whether it's by remembering difficult times or yearning for good times, let's consecrate our hearts, open ourselves up to the holiness of the land, connect ourselves to the beauty of Eretz Yisrael, to the promise of Eretz Yisrael, to the natural relationship we have with Eretz Yisrael. And God willing, miyagon l'simcha me'evel yom tov, from darkness to light, we'll all be in Eretz Yisrael together, celebrating with our own hands, touching the walls of the Beis HaMikdash."
It is an old story. The Jewish people for generations have felt this kind of connection to the Kotel and to Eretz Yisrael. This is just one of many examples where we have this. The Kli Yakar writes something that is absolutely amazing. The Kli Yakar writes the following. The Kli Yakar says, can you see my screen? Still a gray box blocking it?
You see part of it, but
Yeah,
that's
now it's
better.
gone.
Now it's gone.
Okay. So the Kli Yakar says the following. The Kli Yakar says, the Kli Yakar, by the way, was the Kli Yakar lived from 1550 to 1615 about. He lived into the 17th century. He was a student of Reb Shlomo Luria. He was the one of the contemporaries of Rabbi Yosef Karo. He wrote a sefer called the Yam Shel Shlomo. And Reb Shlomo Luria, if you remember from the very first series of the Great Debates, was the one who was not too excited against the conventional thinking. He was not too excited about the publication of the Shulchan Aruch. He thought that it was not the appropriate way to approach halacha. Obviously, time has shown that the majority has ruled in favor with the Shulchan Aruch against Rav Shlomo Luria, but the Kli Yakar was one of the students of Rav Shlomo Luria. He was a tremendous Talmud Chacham and has a number of svarim with drashas and beautiful insights into the Torah. So one of them is the Kli Yakar. He writes the following. He says, Kol mistakel b'makom hakodesh hahu. That anyone, and this is his commentary on the psukim about Akedas Yitzchak. When Avram Avinu takes Yitzchak to be bound as a sacrifice, he brings them up to Har Moriah, which is the place of Har Habayis, the place where the Beis Hamikdash stood. Says the Kli Yakar, Kol mistakel b'makom hahu. Anyone who witnesses this place, anyone who looks at the place of the Makom HaMikdash where the Kotel is, miyad nislabesh ruach tahara ukdusha, that immediately a person will be nislabesh. Nislabesh technically means will be clothed, will be enveloped with a ruach tahara ukdusha, a spirit of purity and holiness. Umelech elyon, and the lofty king, as we refer to God during the Yom Noraim, biyofyo yisbarach, in his majestic way, techazena einav ubiria lechud sagila adam liknos hashlemas hahu b'makom asher yikra lo Avraham Hashem yira'eh. And in that place, God will see you, and you will be able to accept God's presence, accept God's omnipresence in this way. Vikari be Yira'eh biyud b'chirik v'yira'eh biyud b'tziri ki kederech sheba liros kach ba liros. That just as God sees you, you also get to see him. Kimiyad bevo shama kishem shashchina roa oso. Just as God sees you when you come to the kotel, kahu roa pnei hashchina. So to you get to experience God by actually seeing Him. Umiyad naase mushba umutza b'dovek b'ziv shchinaso yisparach me'ein olam haba. And you get to experience just a fraction of what olam haba is by experiencing sitting by the kotel. When the Kotel Plaza was being developed, there was a group of Rabbanim that were working on all the different details of how to set up the Kotel Plaza. This is going back already to the early part of the 20th century. This was a Vod that was led by Rav Kook, Zatzal, the first chief rabbi of Israel. Rav Kook had a group of Rabbanim and a group of professionals working on this, and someone came over to Rav Kook, and they're going through all the details of how far back should the plaza go, where should the lady section be, working out every single small detail with regard to the different walking paths to get to the kotel, and working out all the details of the kotel. And someone who was a part of one of these groups came over to Rav Kook and said, like, why is this such a big deal? I mean, I understand that it's, okay, it's a remnants of the fact that there was, a Temple Mount that was, right there, right behind the wall. But I mean, okay, fine. It seems more like a historical site. I don't really understand why we're making such a big deal out of this. So Rav Kook responded, and he said that the wall is not just a bunch of stones. He said the wall, each stone represents a heart. Now some hearts are cold like stone, and he said like yours. Rav Kook is able to say that, and but then there are other types of hearts that aren't stone. There are other types of hearts that are warm. And the kotel, each stone of the kotel represents each heart. The levavos alta Yisrael represents the hearts of all the Jewish people. Each stone represents a heart of the Jewish people. This is the emotional reaction that the Jewish people have always had to the kotel. Going back, I recently saw a photo. I have to show you during the next segment of the series, a photo of the kotel during the 1870s, of what it looked like. It looks exactly the way it does now. Obviously less people, but people are up against the wall davening. So what is it that is so impactful about the kotel? Why is the kotel this place that we yearn for, that we get so excited for, that we tear kriya for, as the Shulchan Aruch says, when we see it, like the way we would tear kriya for a parent? A place where Rav Soloveitchik saw his teacher kissing the hands of someone that was able to actually touch the kotel. It's a place that we take for granted today, but it's a really, really special place. As the Kli Yakar said, when you sit there, you get overwhelmed and enveloped with the kedusha of the Shekhinah. So what is it about the kotel? So if you take a look over here, the Medrash Rabbah, the Medrash tells us the following: Amar Rav Acha taught, La'olam ein hashchina zaza mikosal amara. That from the kotel, the Shekhinah never left. Meaning, even during the destruction of the temple, which according to the Rambam, which we'll see after the temple was destroyed, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, lost its tangible kedusha. However, Yerushalayim and the kotel never lost, the Makom HaMikdash never lost the Shekhinah. And the Medrash makes a specific point of saying the Kosel HaMa'aravi, which we'll have to get to, is a debate. It was a major debate as to whether or not the kotel was a wall of the Beis Hamikdash itself, or was a perimeter wall around the Har HaBayis, around Temple Mount, which we'll get to, that whole fascinating historical episode. But the Shekhinah never left. The omnipresence never left the Kotel HaMa'aravi. What does that mean, it never left? You have to understand. What that means is, like, if let's say I invited you to a wedding, and at the end of the wedding I saw that I didn't notice you there. So I go over to you and ask you, did you come to the wedding? It's a yes or no question, right? Either you were there or you weren't there, right? It's the same thing, right? You can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are pregnant or you're not pregnant. When we read in the Medrash that the Shekhinah never left the Kotel, that means that even though you could have a scenario where the Shekhinah is not present all the time, like in a shul even, if there's no one praying there, so the Shekhinah is not present, the Gemara in Brachos tells us. It's only if it's being utilized, the Shekhinah will come back. But the Kotel, the Shekhinah is always there. The omnipresence is always there. Shnei Amar, as the pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, Dome Dodi Latzvi, that God is like a tzvi, he's like a deer, Omed Achar Koslenu, that he is always right behind the wall. He's always right there. The Kotel is a place that literally has the Shekhinah present. You know, Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin. Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin lived from 1818 to 1898. He was a Rav in like every major European Jewish community. In Brisk, he was a Rav. In Brisk, he ended up in Yerushalayim. He was a Rav in Lomja. Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin was unbelievable. Was an immense Talmud Chacham, and he emigrated to Eretz Yisrael to live the last 20 years of his life. It was a major dream of his. It was something that he always wanted to do. And the last 20 years of his life, he was able to live in Yerushalayim. Do you know that during those 20 years, when he immigrated to Eretz Yisrael in 1879, until he died in 1898, you know, he never went to the Kotel. So they asked him, they said, you have such a yearning, you have such a love in Yerushalayim, you live in Yerushalayim. Well, how could you not go to the Kotel? Why wouldn't you have gone to the Kotel? So he said, well, I'm quite nervous to go to the Kotel. I'm afraid that I'm going to go there and I'm going to faint. I'm afraid that it's just going to be too overwhelming of an experience for me, that it's not going to be good for my health. Because Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin understood the fact that when the Medrash says that the Shekhinah is there, that means mamish, when you approach the Kotel, you are approaching the presence of God. The presence of God is right there, and that was too much for him. He never went to the Kotel. The Rambam tells us, as I just alluded to, the Rambam tells us that this experience of the Shekhinah by the Kotel and in Yerushalayim is something that is tangible. And then the Rambam explains himself. He says, Lama ani omer, the Rambam says, why is it that I say that in the Mikdash of Yerushalayim, that in the place of the Beis HaMikdash and in Yerushalayim, why is it that we say Shekdusha Rishona Kedushasam La'asid Lava? Why is it that we say that original Kedusha that was infused into Eretz Yisrael remained by the Kotel and by the Makom HaMikdash, the place where the temple stood. So when Yeshua came and conquered the land of Israel in the beginning of Sefer Yehoshua, that created a Kedusha, an infused holiness into the land, and that infused permeated throughout the land of Israel and Yerushalayim, where the Beis HaMikdash was. And once that place was consecrated for that, so the Kedusha never left. However, Kedusha's Shar Eretz Yisrael, however, the Kedusha of the rest of the land of Israel, when we were pushed back into exile, so then the Shekhinah, then the Kedusha did leave. For example, like the Rambam says, leading Shvius u'Maiser u'Yotze, you know, taking Meiser today and not working the land during the Shemitah year, according to the Rambam, is only a rabbinic institution. It's not a biblical institution. It's important that we take it seriously as we would any rabbinic law, but it is simply a rabbinic institution, not a biblical institution, because the Kedusha is no longer there. It's no longer tangible in the land of Israel like it is the rest of like it is in Yerushalayim. Lokit Shalasid level. So says the Rambam Lefi, Shekdushas HaMikdash Yerushalayim Mipnei HaShechina. It's due to the fact that the omnipresence is there, like the Medrash says. The Shechina Eina Betela, and the Shechina can never be destroyed. Meaning, even though we are going to be mourning the destruction, and we currently are mourning the destruction of the temple during the 3 weeks and during Tisha B'Av, at the climax of that Avelis, we're going to be mourning the destruction of the temple. And you know, like the Mishnah Berurah says, that, you know, we, you know, in theory, should really be mourning the loss of the temple all the time. We should always be in a state of of Avelus. And it's the reason why, according to many, we don't have a Birchas Kohanim every single day of the year outside of the land of Israel, and only on Yontif, because Yontif has an artificial Kedusha associated with it, an artificial Simcha, an artificial happiness associated with it. But the rest of the days of the year, we're supposed to be experiencing an Avelus. You know, that there are many people that have a custom that at midnight they recite special Tehillim and special Piyutim over the destruction of Yerushalayim, strictly over the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Every single night they experience this, called Tikkun Chatzos. It's something we're always supposed to be doing, which is why the Mishnah Berurah says that if someone goes to see the Kotel, you know, the Mishnah Berurah says that day following, they're not supposed to drink meat or eat wine. Isn't that unbelievable? That if you really can experience what it means to be standing in front of the Kotel, it means that yes, the Shechina is there, but there was an entire Beis Hamikdash that stood behind it that is no longer there. That is supposed to have you're supposed to have a visceral reaction to that. And it's supposed to be something that should put you off from having meat and drinking wine the rest of that day. It's brought down in the Mishnah Berurah. However, the Shechina is Eina B'Tela. The mourning that we do is not over the loss of the Shechina in Yerushalayim. The Shechina is always there. And we're going to actually get to, one of the topics we're going to have to get to is, you know, we stick, you know, a lot of people have the custom to stick notes inside of the Kotel. That custom, I think the earliest place we find that custom is actually from the Or Chaim HaKadosh. The Or Chaim HaKadosh actually advised someone to stick a letter inside of the Kotel as a segula for Parnasa. It's a fascinating story, exactly what happened there, but we'll get to that. But and it poses a question, which is, you know, if you stick something into the Kotel, you know, is that kind of tampering with the fact that it is a place that has Shechina, right? And the same, you wouldn't do that to a Sefer Torah, so can you do that to the Kotel? It's a very interesting question. We'll have to discuss it. But it's because the Shechina, the omnipresence, is always there by the Kotel. Even though Yerushalayim is in a state of depression right now, however, it still attains its Kedusha. It still has its Kedusha because the Shechina is always there. There's absolutely no question that when one goes to the Kotel, it is a very, very unique experience. I'll just share one personal unique experience that happened with me going to the Kotel. A few years ago, we took a family vacation to Israel, and we only had Leap at the time. She was a baby, and it was Shabbos, and for whatever reason, I had a very hard time sleeping that night. I'm tossing and turning from the time I got into bed. It's already past midnight. I'm tossing and turning. Liba's sleeping. Brooke is sleeping. And I realized I guess I'm just not tired. Maybe I was jet lagged from the travels. We only got in that Thursday, so I say to Brooke, I say hi. She says, yeah, is everything okay? I said, yeah. But I'm leaving. This is like 12:30 in the morning, in Yerushalayim in a hotel, and I said I'm leaving. I can't sleep. I think I'm jet lagged. I'm going to the Kotel. So I get up and I grab a sefer, I grab my talis, and I go to the Kotel, and I learn there all night until Nates, and I'm able to daven Nates with one of the Gedolei Ador, Rav Victor Nevinsal, right by the Kotel. And it's just the experience of learning by the Kotel, of davening by the Kotel, is something that it leaves an impression on your heart. I literally I don't think I'll ever forget the feel of the mist that morning that I felt upon my skin davening by the Kotel. The dew that fell on my skin that morning, I don't think I'll ever forget it. Because it's just, you feel the Shechina right there. It's tangible. So it poses a very interesting question, which is, we say in davening every single day, we say a tefillah, we say, V'techezena einenu b'shuvcha l'tzion b'rachamim, that we ask God that God should open up our eyes, V'techezena einenu, that our eyes should be able to witness, B'shuvcha l'tzion biracham, that your presence should return to Jerusalem, to Yerushalayim, biracham, and with mercy. Baruch atah Hashem hamachzir shchinato l'tzion. So the question is, well, hold on one second. We just gave many sources pointing to the fact that the Shekhinah never left. We point to the Kli Yakar. The Kli Yakar told us that when you go and you stand by the Kotel, you become enveloped by Kedusha, and that's because the Medrash tells us that the Shekhinah is always there. And the Rambam says that the Shekhinah ain't Batela, that even though Yerushalayim is destroyed, but the Makom HaMikdash, the Shekhinah is there. So hold on one second. Why are we asking then for God to return his Shekhinah, to return his presence to the land of Israel, to not just the land of Israel, but Litzion, which is referring to Yerushalayim? So hold on one second. I thought Yerushalayim, the Shekhinah never left. So why is it then we're asking that the Shekhinah should be returned to Yerushalayim? So I think that while certainly there are those like Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, if you want to see a picture of him, there are those like Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, and there are those like the Kli Yakar, and there are those like the Rambam, who, when they say that the Shekhinah never left, they aren't just saying conceptually, yes, it is true, fact, the Shekhinah never left, but they actually experienced it. They know that the Shekhinah is there. It's not just conceptual, but it's a reality for them. That the Shekhinah, the omnipresence, is by the Kotel and on Har HaBayis, which means that for someone like Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, that is too potent of a kedusha for me to experience in my poor health. I won't be able to handle it, and therefore I can't go. And for someone like Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who, when discussing the laws of tearing kriya at the Kotel, said that, you know, the halacha is if you haven't been to the Kotel in more than 30 days, you have to tear kriya. He says, except for if you live inside Yerushalayim. Why? So he said, because how's it possible that you live in Yerushalayim and you're not, and you wouldn't go to the Kotel and you wouldn't experience the Shekhinah while living there? It's just not possible. And there are people like the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim, that you can go see the Kotel and then continue to eat meat that day. Because when they go to the Kotel, what they are really experiencing is they're experiencing the Shekhinah, they're experiencing the presence of God in its most tangible form, but then also seeing the presence of God without the shell of the Beis HaMikdash around them. And that just breaks them. So what we daven to God is that we say, V'techazena einenu, not that you should return, not v'tachzir, not that you should return your presence, but rather techazena einenu, that you should allow our eyes to notice the Shekhinah. Because the more that we actually notice the Shekhinah in Yerushalayim, so then the more likely it's actually going to be rebuilt. As it says, as the Yerushalmi tells us that Kol she'ein roa Yerushalayim, that anyone who did not mourn over Yerushalayim in its destroyed state, eno yiro so bebinyana, that anyone that never mourned the destruction of the temple is not going to see Yerushalayim in its rebuilt state. So the Shulchan Aruch, when it quotes that, uses it in the present tense, that you will not witness presently Yerushalayim in its rebuilt state. What do you mean? Presently, you're not going to be experiencing it. What do you mean? When Yerushalayim gets rebuilt, so then I understand. Okay, so if you didn't mourn over it, and then you're not going to be able to experience it. You're not going to be zocheh. But according to the Shulchan Aruch, no, it's further than that. Right now, that means you're just not experiencing the Shekhinah inside Yerushalayim. If you aren't able to mourn over it, that means you don't actually understand what's missing. It means you never actually experienced the Shekhinah there, but the Shekhinah without the rest of the accoutrement around it, without the accessibility to be able to serve God with the temple. So without that experience, without that step one of experiencing the Shekhinah, you're never going to get to step two. So when in Mirza Hashem, when we're able to revisit Yerushalayim, and we're able to revisit the Kotel, So Emir Hashem, it will be an experience that we will be able to see the Shekhinah. And it will be an experience where we will be able to understand why Rabbi Shua Leib had a hard time going in the first place, because it was just too tangible of a Kedusha for him, and will be enveloped by the Shekhinah, as the Kli Yakar put so beautifully. Emir Hashem. Just a commercial for the future of what's coming up ahead. So we could discuss. There's a beautiful sefer that was gifted to me, written by the current Sephardic chief rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef. He's the son of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, and he wrote a beautiful sefer over here that deals solely with the laws of the Kotel, which many of the sources tonight came from. And in the back, he has a whole number of different questions, historical questions, questions related to the building of the Kotel, questions related to the laws of going to the Kotel, what's the status of the Kotel Plaza, and other pertinent things. So I want to, over the next couple of weeks, as we prepare for Tisha B'Av, to be able to go through some of these unique halachos, what we do in our own homes and outside of Yerushalayim in order to mourn the destruction and things of that nature. And that's some of the coming weeks ahead. I'm happy to stay on for a couple minutes if anyone has any extra questions.
Well, Rabbi, was the Shekhinah, is it just at the, so you say it hasn't left, is that it hasn't left the Kotel or all of Yerushalayim? What was I'm not sure I understood which
So
one.
according to the Rambam, it's in the Kotel, and Har HaBayis, and the Old City of Jerusalem.
Old City.
Now, the Old City of Jerusalem that we have today, or what we call the Old City, is actually much larger than what the Rambam is referring to as the Old City. The Old City is, I forget the exact boundaries, but it's much, much smaller. It's basically just the surrounding area of Har HaBayis. Yeah. Yeah. It does not include Mamilla Mall.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. All right. We'll stop here. It's wonderful to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Good night.
Appreciate it. Great.
Sure.